Hello, you're back with a single malt review as we take another foray into the wonderful world of Irish whiskey.
Irish whiskey. It never rains but pours. Irish whiskey here.
Writer's Tears, something of a classic.
Yeah,
Modern
Writer's
classic, at least.
Tears Copper Pot Irish whiskey. And if anyone remembers my diatribe on the various species of Irish whiskey in the previous video, will know more or less what that means. Although it's not 100% true on this one, is it?
So we have, this is an interesting case, this whiskey is all barley, all the way. Only some of it, though, is malted barley. From what we can tell, so Writer's Tears, it is a blend of roughly 60% pot-stilled barley whiskey and about 40% single malt whiskey. Triple distilled in both cases from two different distilleries, then vatted, then aged for an uncertain, slightly secret amount of time in bourbon barrels, all bourbon, as opposed to a Teelings we tried previously, which had a wonderfully eclectic mix.
But bourbon, so this might be sort of the reverse of that. Aged, I suspect, for, well, obviously not long enough to bother putting on the bottle, so that usually means sub 10 years old. I think it's safe to assume that this has been coloured. Someone's having a bit
chill
of
filtered, which is great, but yeah, I'd assume possibly artificially coloured based on previous experience.
They're doing quite well to get away with non-chill filtering at 40%.
Yeah.
It must be quite a sort of light-bodied whiskey there. So as you say, Middleton and Cooley, well, Cooley probably respectively, Middleton definitely. Middleton providing the pure pot still, which is a blend of malted and unmalted barley, and Cooley providing the Irish single malt, which is more or less single malt as we know it from Scotland.
Should point out, the Walsh Whisky Distillery Limited is the company who's provided this, but despite the name, as far as we're aware, they don't actually distill. This is is produced in bonded warehouses.
I think I shafted you on the pour there before I put my lips on it. Balance it out there.
Sure.
So that's
a rich nose.
That's a fairly happening nose.
It's very clear cut. After, obviously, Teeling is going to be fresh on our minds because we've just tried it, but in comparison to that, there's a small number of very distinct, very strong aromas here.
Yeah.
There's a strong hit of malt, there's honey, there's ginger.
It's a more conventional nose, that's for sure. Much, much more conventional than Teeling.
I'm getting a certain amount of youngish aromas there, so possibly not been matured in those bourbon barrels for terribly long, but it's long enough to...
Definitely, I think between 6 and 8, and I might be being a touch generous there. It's not old whiskey by any measure, but I don't think it's really detracting from it. As you know, bourbon and Irish whiskey both benefit a younger age, or at least they tolerate a younger age, just like Islay whiskey might. So it smells alright to me. I'm liking it so far.
Yeah, there's a majority being that unmalted barley. But there's still a very significant portion of single malt.
And it really is a bourbon. It's a bourbon. Well, maybe not an ensemble, but it's definitely a bourbon thing. It's vanilla. It's coconut. It's got a bit of honey there.
A bit of dried pineapple, which is a new one for my nosing palate.
Teensy bit of maybe like a toasted cashew or something like that, but not a massively complex palate. Fairly primary. So we'll see what's on the nose. I should say. We'll see what's on the palate.
Ooh, that is a forthright flavour. There's a fair whack of spirituous heat immediately, but that dissolves quickly into crystallized ginger, dried pineapple again.
Yeah, hey, that's pretty good.
Coconut, macaroons. There's a lot happening there, but it's all quite consistent. It's a good progression from one flavour to the next. Nice buffet.
That's very Irish, and I think that's really quite nice. Yeah. There's a distinct tin fruit quality there. There's like a tinned pineapple almost. Coming through, there's sort of white peach, almost a nectarine. More peach than nectarine, certainly, but those are fresh fruits as well.
It's getting a lot of at the drier, fruitier end of the Speyside whiskies, even. Has some hallmarks of those, some elements, some
There's other dried fruit in there. You say dried pineapple, that's a really good one. There's some dried paw in there.
Yeah.
Also, and there's... The other one had all sorts of strange things. We're talking about Teeling now. It had all sorts of licorice and aniseed and weird things. Almost tasted like wheat would give you, but of course it had no wheat in it. But Neither does this, but this one is much more conventional. But
Yes.
I think it's working better.
We're probably,
for it.
since there's only one type of cask involved here, we're probably tasting more of what is actually intrinsic to Irish whiskey generally. We know what's been imparted by the casks here, so what we're tasting more is the underlying, I guess, the innate Irishness of the whiskey itself, which I personally am liking a lot.
Yeah, I'll give it a wee dot of water here. I don't think it really needs it, but I'll give it the benefit of the doubt. No, you wouldn't call that a manifest change. No, it does a bit more to the palate than it does to the nose, but really it just softens it. It's not really bringing out any extra flavours to the fore there, but
It's bringing out the pear, though. I think you mentioned pears before. I'm tasting that now, at least. Tinned pear.
yeah, tinned all sorts of things really, which is
But not
Quite
without
weird.
that heavy metallic ding
Yeah.
as you get from, when you think of tinned fruit flavours for, say, some Speyside whiskies.
it's an easygoing whiskey, but I
Yeah.
think it does quite well for the fact that it is 100% malt. That gives it a sort of a
Well,
density
it's not
of
100%
flavour.
malt, 100% barley, certainly, but only 40%
Oh yes, of course,
it is
of course,
actually malt.
100% barley. I'm
Yeah.
I'm stuck in my Scotch whisky ways here. I mean to say, it's not a grain blend. It's all barley, although that barley has taken different routes to
Yeah.
distillation.
I think there's just a slight roughness from the unmalted barley, which I think is actually helping here, since that's been vatted together and then matured along with the malted barley spirit. It means you get that barley flavour, but a little bit of the fire, a bit of feistiness from that from the barley spirit.
I think this is. I had this complaint with the teeling. If was this 1 or 2 years older, I think it would be coming into its own as a sort of a sipping straight
Yeah.
whiskey. As it is, I think it's actually rather good. I'm enjoying it, but I think it might be more at home with an ice cube or mixing Irish whiskey is difficult. The only thing I really like mixing Irish whiskey into is a whiskey sour, which is one of those slightly questionable cocktails with raw egg in it, which is I will arguably not for everybody, but I think Jameson's and other gentle Irish whiskies does a really good job in that particular cocktail, so that would be my recommendation for this one. As it is, I think this one may lean on the needing ice just a little too hard for my usual stipulations. So scores for this one, I like it more than the Teeling. To compare Irish with Irish, I do like this more than the Teeling. I gave that one in the high 70s. This one it's on to the next run. This one's an 80. What do you think?
Ooh. Well, I like this about more or less as much as the Teelings, only in different ways. This one brings some very clear characters. It really evokes its roots, I think. You can taste more of what's gone into it. Whereas the Teelings had a lot of astonishing flavours. This one has some very distinct, very characteristic flavours to it. I rate it 88.
Wow, okay. There you go. Again, Irish whiskey proving divisive.
Yeah.
Very, very diverse scores here.
I would love to see an age statement writer's Teelings expression. That'd be great to see some.
Age statement Irish whiskey is very difficult and very expensive. You can get it via Redbreast. That's the usual route to age stated Irish whiskey. It always has been. And it still is. You can get 12, 15 or 21 if you're feeling really dangerous. We have not felt that dangerous as yet, but we may in the future. It does come on special now and again. I know some people have requested it, so it is on the radar. So any blips to that effect, I will snap up and we'll see how it goes. But as it is, I think this is a decent foray into the sort of the shallow end, at least, of Irish whiskey, but still good Irish whiskey. None of this is Paddy's, that's for sure. None of this is Jameson. This is a significant step up from blended Irish whiskey, or rather, blended Irish whiskey as opposed to blended malt Irish whiskey, which this is sort of. I guess that's the hopper you'd have to put this into. As I said, Irish whiskey complicated to define. Yes. But anyway, this one, for me and for Dave as well, a step up from the Writer's Tears. So if you have a choice
this is in fact the Writer's Tears, step up from the Teelings.
Quite so. I wouldn't even hazard a guess as to how many whiskies we are in here, but it's obviously beginning to show. if there's two of these on the shelf, we would say go for the Writer's Tears.
Yeah.
Because I think they're about the same price. They're certainly heralded as the same sort of
I'd say they're both as good, just in wildly different
They
ways.
are very, very
If you want to see two
different,
extremes of what you can do with the concept of Irish whiskey, go for it. Try
One
them both.
is one is certainly conventional, where the other one is somewhat whack, and they'll definitely give you different things. So hey,
Yes.
buy both if you're in that kind of mood. Anyway, we're going to try something we have never ever tried before. So girdle your groins, and we'll be right back. That's not how the saying goes, is it?
Loins.
Loins. There you go.
Not quite as salacious.
I was close.
We'll see you
Sergeant,
then.
we'll be right back.